Jonathan and I, we were kind of like, we hit it off from the very first time when we met each other, because we are on the same wavelength when it comes to buyer first strategies. And we share a serious grudge against some marketing enemies, which is short-termism. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, like based on what I've seen, what you do,
Yep.
these are all also your enemies. So short-termism and short-sightedness and pitch slapping. So like really like dragging people down the funnel with brute force and fragmented marketing and underestimating how brand efforts and creative efforts really improve efficiency. It's really an efficiency game right here.
You're spot on.
Yeah, so with Jonathan being the paid media wizard and me being more on the organic side, I thought, okay, this is an interesting combination, and we can jump on a little session here and exchange some war stories. And we chose the topic of paid media strategies for the real and messy buyer journey. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being here and for agreeing to speak with me. And
thanks for inviting me. Yeah, it should be good.
Yeah, and I see already people are joining in, so that's really cool to see, even though there were some hiccups.
Crazy technical glitches. Yeah, we blame LinkedIn and Zoom. I'm going to be writing a formal letter to both of them. How dare
they? Yeah, exactly. So there is this ambiguous, uncomfortable space, right, where your prospects discover your brand. So they first hear about you, and then something happens, and then they buy from you or not, right? But we assume that some of them will buy, right? And that uncomfortable space, that's the messy middle, that is the biggest nightmare for marketers. And I call it the marketing waiting room. And basically I'm designing waiting rooms for a living. And I do this with organic strategies mostly, but paid strategies also play a big role here. But because I'm not really a paid media wizard, just like Jonathan right here, I really would like to pick his brains or just hear his stories about like how to build this sort of waiting room with paid advertising. So Jonathan, today we'll unpack these strategies, and I would like to start with like a more general question, because it's all about balancing brand and activation plays, right? And you can do this through many channels, and paid channels are part of it. So we often hear about this ideal split between brand and activation, or brand and direct response marketing. And that is like about 60% for brand and 40% for a direct response. So, but in your experience, how does that really reflect in paid media strategies and in budget management, especially at scrappy startups or B2B SaaS startups, because that's where you're specializing, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so it's interesting. I mean, I think for people that don't know that 60-40 rule, it's by Les and Peter Field. They wrote an article or blog, I believe, and it's also in their book as well, about over a decade ago. And then I think it was republished back in the B2B Institute from LinkedIn as well. And so it comes from award submission data from the IPA is where that data comes from. So it's a little bit aged, but I guess the practicality of it is that you don't really see that split being that black and white ever, right? It's really there to just be a heuristic or a mental model to say, hey, generally, how should we think about splitting things up? And one of the other things that's been actually a little bit more common to hear is the 95-5 rule, which is from John Dawes or the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And so that's gotten a lot of traction, especially on LinkedIn as of recent. It's been around for a while now, but it basically is just to back up this whole Les and Peter Field conversation. It basically just says that, hey, we know that all people are not in market for what we do. They're not all in market. And so the general ratio is that 5% of people are out of market, or sorry, in market, and then 95% are out of market. And so we have to figure out how we, divvy up our budget. And one of the things that's very difficult is there's no real black and white formula to do this. Now, a practical way on paid, to your point about talking about paid, just since that's the lens that I'm coming at this at, is you could easily take Google Ads, for example, and we could talk about non-brand, and you could size up all of the high intent keywords related to your product category or the capabilities that your product offers, and then understand how much search volume there is in a given window, 30-day window for your specific product category. And that could at least give you some type of idea of what amount of demand is out there currently for your product category. And then of course you go into looking at the low CPC bids, high CPC bids, and understand, okay, cool, now that I understand the general cost of all this, I could maybe put together a number that's actually real to say, hey, if we were to go out and capture all the demand on Google, which again is just one channel, it's not like everyone goes to Google to search for products, but some people do, then that would be a way to get to a number to figure out how to split that. But in practicality, it just never really works out exactly that way. So I'll stop for a second, see if you have any follow-ups on that. But
Yeah. So I get what you mean here. So I'm more interested now in like how does it in practice? How does it look like those brand campaigns versus activation campaigns? What is the difference here?
yeah. The primary difference is that, one set of campaigns in terms of direct response is focused on a core CTA or goal. You typically might even have a landing page dedicated. So a perfect example might be an incentivized demo campaign with a $100 gift card would be a direct response campaign where the primary goal is to send somebody there a message or show them an ad, get them to click, go to the landing page or convert on a lead gen form, and then move forward into a demo, right? So that would be a pure activation type of tactic.
Yeah.
And there's many out there. It could be an audit, an assessment, whatever the offer is, or even gated content. Those are also direct response types of offers, just lower friction than, say, a demo. Brand building or brand marketing and other demand gen type campaigns are not goaled around direct conversions. You're really looking at engagement rate, click through rate, the amount of percent of views on a video. You're looking at time on page, how far they got down on the page. You're looking for things like the number of brand mentions across social media sites. You're looking at direct traffic and the amount of brand searches of people searching for your brand, incrementality tests. I mean, you can get really complicated with some of this stuff. I think for most early stage brands, it's better to keep it simple and use some of the things I just mentioned before. But that's the big difference between the two. Is one's more geared towards, leading indicators. It's more long-term oriented. We're not looking for short-term gain because most of these things are going to take months and quarters to build future cash flows. And so we need to always set the expectations that you're always going to have some campaigns that are targeting a cold audience that has no clue who you are. And we want to focus on aligning ourselves with the key buying triggers, or the academic term would be category entry points, with ultimately what our product does. So that when people do come in market, they think of us and they say, aha, I have a paid media problem or I have a brand awareness problem. I'm going to think of OmniLab or I'm going to think of marketing waiting room or whatever it is. So that's how to think about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So you mentioned targeting, and that is where very often, like with paid ads, that is kind of breaks my brain sometimes. So because you cannot really, there is no way to track the entire journey of one person across all the channels, or it's not like it's kind of utopia,
No,
right? Like you cannot
no,
do this
not
for at
possible.
least not for yeah. So how does targeting works, for brand awareness campaigns versus the activation campaigns? And I'm more interested in activation. So what if okay, we have this campaign, we want to activate people, we want to give them like a gift card in exchange for, I don't know, their time or a demo or whatever that is.
Mm.
How do you figure out who to target?
Yeah, I think it's always more nuanced because there's always this overlap between brand marketing or typical brand campaigns and direct response. And sometimes even a direct response campaign can be somewhat of a brand play at the same time, and then vice versa. So it's kind of interesting how they
Hmm.
go together, which is something that we can talk about. But I mean, if you think about like even a TV ad that's targeting a group of people that are cold that have no clue what you do, you could still have people that clearly are going to see that ad and be in market. And so,
Yeah.
what we typically do, though, back to your question, is on your brand awareness campaigns, the goal and the objective should be max reach across your whole entire ICP. And so, everyone that could be a good fit for your product, we want to achieve the maximum amount of reach to reach as many out of market buyers or potentially in market, because it's always going to be a mix. We don't know all the time whether you're in market or out of market. And then to your point about
Yeah.
messy middle, people move themselves in a market and out of market. And so it's not
Exactly.
a black and white binary thing. Once I'm in market, I'm ready to go. My budgets might change, politics might change, my VP of marketing moved on to another company, something like that happened. And so that's the typical thing we want to look at, we're looking at brand campaigns, is how do we achieve maximum reach on a channel where our ICP spends time, And then once we can, achieve whatever the target reach percentage is, then we can expand out on other channels as budget allows for it. But I think the, easy place for anyone is just to start with as few channels as possible, max out reach as much as possible, focus on the key buying triggers, the situations that your product solves for, so that when people come into market, they think of you.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And oh my gosh, I have so many questions that are kind of off the script for us here. But
Yeah,
um,
do it.
so I'm really curious how you choose channels and formats, because there's also a lot of
Mhm.
nuance there, right? And you're saying that, yeah, you need to max out reach. But reach on, I don't know, let's say Reddit ads is not the same as reach on, I don't know, any other platform, right? So how do you balance that? How do you make choices there?
I mean, back to your original question, how do you choose the channels that you want to spend money on? I think is the tough one, right? I mean, the reality is that B2B buyers or humans are across all sorts of channels. I mean, even people that listen to this recording later, the ones that are live now, or you or me, like we're not all just, I mean, we're B2B buyers, I guess, to a degree, right? But we're not all
Mhm.
on LinkedIn all the time. You might
Yeah.
be on TikTok sometimes, you might be on Instagram, you might be on Meta, maybe on other channels that are outside of kind of the paid world, but you're on a whole bunch of different channels. And so, ultimately, what we need to do first is really just get active in the channel where we feel like our ICP is spending time, so we can start to get some signals back to understand, hey, wait a minute, is our audience even active here? And that's easier clearly on some channels than others, right? LinkedIn being the easiest because people actually have their title, company, and all that information pretty up to date as it compares to, say, Meta or other channels. But we need to ideally assess that situation. And that takes a little bit of time just understanding the channel dynamics. The next thing that you could do is just build out an actual audience inside the channel. And then you could say, hey, like how many people are in my ICP that are on this channel? Again, some channels are easier than others, but with channels like Meta, you can still use third-party data to build out audience lists with your exact target accounts to get a better match rate on a channel like Meta, because many times it's hard to natively target exactly who you're going after. But
Mhm.
my big message here, the takeaway is that we need to kind of, as B2B marketers, not just see LinkedIn as the only channel out there. I think everyone over indexes so much on LinkedIn. And if you look at the numbers, just to give you like one stat, because we do run this number all the time, but on a cold audience on LinkedIn, you're usually only projected to hit around 40 to 45% of that audience. That means half of the audience number that you're trying to target on LinkedIn is not even active in a regular 30-day period. And so that means that there's a whole
Mm.
bunch of people that you're not getting exposure to. And so that's why we need to think about other channels, back to your point on Reddit or, whatever the channel is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so but you mentioned that it's better to start small, right? So start on one channel. So how do you stack or layer these channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest starting point for us and the way that we think about it is that, if you start with one channel, let's just say it is LinkedIn, because I think most
Mm-hmm.
people are naturally familiar with LinkedIn and they're probably advertising at some level on LinkedIn. The easy way for me to think about it is just have we already maxed out the amount of people that we're reaching on LinkedIn that we know are active, would be the first thing I think about. And if we feel like we've gotten to that point, then we maybe would add on another channel to the mix and say go to Reddit or whatever other channel we think is active. But if we haven't, I would still really come back, and this is the same for Google Ads too, right? If we haven't maxed out search impression share on the top converting keywords that are driving pipeline for our business, because Google Ads for us is predominantly a direct response bottom of the funnel channel, then why do we need to add another channel to the mix? Now, one
Mm-hmm.
would say, well, should we be testing and trying to see which channels are the most efficient, cost effective? Yeah, sure. We should take certainly small budgets and try to test out other channels, no doubt, because there could be channels that are just cheaper to reach the same audience from a CPM or CPC perspective. But many times I feel like we're running around trying to add on more and more channels all the time, right? And you know this, and I know this. And everyone wants to say, well, we haven't tested this, we haven't tested that. Like, I'd love to try out something here. When really it's like, well, we haven't even scratched the surface on this channel. We've been running it maybe for only a couple of months, and you all of a sudden already want to go to another channel. And so I'm not answering your question directly in terms of how you stack it, but I think I just push back on the question a little bit and just make sure that people have really gone deep into the one channel or couple of channels first before stacking on all the others on top of it.
Yeah. And how do you feel about like the foundational work, that the pre-work that needs to go into that you have to set up before you even start
Yeah.
thinking about getting onto any channels.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, one example here, I mean, like, let's say that you're not spending any money on paid social. You're not doing anything on LinkedIn or anything on Meta. Like, what are some of the prereqs to wanting to even spend some money there? And do you do that in an instance when you just want to test out messaging? I generally lean on the side of avoiding using channels like, LinkedIn ads or Meta ads for just pure message testing. If you're in a position where you haven't spent anything at all, and really what I'm looking for first is like, one, the basics. Do we have a really deep understanding of our customer? Most Series B, C, D companies should have a pretty solid understanding at that point. If you don't, then that'd be a little bit nerve wracking, but really deep understanding of our customer, really Loctite targeting on our ICP or the specific segment that we're going after. That'd be obviously a big thing. And then from there, do we have any inbound traffic that's already hitting our website today that converts at a comfortable rate defined by each company based on your unit economics? And if we feel like some of those things are happening, then paid social will start to have certainly a much better impact on the bottom line, and whether it be from a brand perspective or direct response perspective, either way. But if you don't have some of those things in place, then it just makes it a lot harder to get information and a lot more expensive just to test messaging. There's all sorts of ways to test messaging out there. I mean, you and I both know, Winter. Winter's certainly one of the messaging testing platforms out there. You can also do it just on a more survey format or get people from your ICP out of the page in other ways. And so it doesn't have to be through a tool like Winter. And so I don't know, those are some ways to kind of think about it, at least. Of course,
Yeah.
lots of other little prereqs, but kind of going quick on the highlight reel.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So now one question that kind of is a follow-up on that is, so obviously the paid media strategies are not like a standalone strategy. This is not a standalone thing. It's like on its own, it's not going to have legs. So what do you recommend that is set up around this, or how does this paid media strategy complements other things that you're doing in your business or for your
Yeah.
clients?
I mean, the perfect example there that I always say is that we should be literally one-on-one with the same target accounts as sales as much as possible. And the reason is because sales is likely already running some type of cold outbound motion to the same target accounts. And so marketing literally should have no excuse to target the same exact accounts, even on channels like Meta, where you can leverage third-party data. But in LinkedIn world, if it's LinkedIn, simple as just getting the same exact target account list that sales is going after. It doesn't mean that you don't have potentially other evergreen campaigns that are running to much broader audiences, but the effects of paid clearly are going to be seen directly inside the campaigns that they're running from cold perspective. We actually did this back when we were working with Drata, and Drata's blown up now. They're, I think, worth, I don't know, $3 or $4 billion now. But we specifically spent a lot of time with them early on when we were spending, I think, only $15,000-$20,000 per month on paid. And we started working with their sales team a lot on the same exact target accounts. And our goal was really to make sure that those accounts were already well familiar with what Drata does, how it works, what the differentiators are, and just really aligning with key buying triggers. And so we saw over time is that we looked at literally, I mean, their sales team gave us this data, but mapped it out month by month. And we saw reply rates increasing month over month after turning on paid. And it wasn't a, straight specific test in terms of incrementality, but we just looked at it just on the broad whole. And over the last, 4 months, we saw, I think it was more than 50% out of this is a little while back now, but more than a 50% increase in our reply rates and meeting set rates. And so you just have to kind of say, all right, well, wait a minute. Like, clearly, I'd love to see all the conversions directly happening in a channel like LinkedIn or Google or whatever channel it is. But we have to remember that, of course, the effects of that are going to be much bigger. It's like when you see an ad, a lot of times, what I'll do at least, I won't even click on the ad. I'll just see something that maybe sounds interesting. I'll go to Google, type in the brand name, and then I'll just go to their website, or I'll type it in directly into my URL. And
Yeah.
so you just have to think about those effects, because it's never as simple as like, saw ad, clicked ad, go to landing page, etc. So
Yeah, exactly. So that brings me to my next question, and that is, we like the safest thing to assume is that people are not going to click. They maybe will look at your ad. So that means a lot for the creative, right? Like what does it mean for the creative exactly? And how do you choose what to put on your ad? How does this whole creative process look like?
yeah. think it's like gets into, zero click content, which I know Amanda over at SparkToro kind of popularized, at least the term. But I mean, zero click ads, content, et cetera, has been around for forever, right? I think the difference or the nuance of what Amanda's talking about and what when we talk about it is that there's people that create an ad to win the click. And so you
Mm-hmm.
think of like something like, I don't know, seven best places to go in France would be the
Mm-hmm.
ad. That's an ad designed to win the click because
Yeah.
maybe you're thinking about going to France or you're interested in it. The information isn't in the channel. You have to click it to get any value from it. There's no
Yeah.
value from the headline, the seven best things to do in France. No value around that. The difference when you start thinking about it from a zero click perspective and actually optimizing content for in-channel consumption, because that's where people want to be. We have to remember that, right? Like they came to LinkedIn to spend time there. That's when you take that same ad, right? The seven best places to go in France or whatever, and you turn that into a carousel and you allow them to see what the seven best places to go are. And maybe there's a CTA at the end of it or something like that with some information about your brand with distinctive brand assets used throughout the carousel. And so like that would be a good example of just like just nice something easy that everyone I think can latch onto that's not too B2B and complex to understand the difference between those two. And that's what we need to really start doing more of. And that could come in all sorts of formats. Carousel, video assets clearly work really well for this, right? Because you can communicate a lot of information even in a 2 to 3 minute window. So that's kind of how to think about it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, I share the same sentiment here. And it's just amazing to me how, very often we get these ads, we put them out there, and we really think, oh yeah, we need people to click, like you said, like okay, seven tips on traveling or whatever that is. And then what do you expect? Like even if people click on it, then what do you really expect? Because you cannot expect that they're going to buy from you. You cannot expect that they're even going to sign up for anything. So
Yeah.
if you do not, like from my perspective, and what I've been like pondering a lot is that you have to really uh, optimize for memorable impact, because people
Mm-hmm.
are just going to, like, they will give you this much of their attention, right?
Exactly.
So standing out is really, really the game here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think there's lots of
Yeah.
ways to do that. I mean, I think that what people get a little too carried away with, I mean, I think there's been the whole concept of don't create ads that look like ads, type of mantra that I think has proliferated for seems like the last like couple of years or so, in at least LinkedIn world. And I think it's important to have sometimes some of those tests with those assets like memes and other things like that, especially when it comes to ad creative. But
Mhm.
if you read, some great stuff by the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, they've got some awesome material on how much data there is to back up the idea of creating distinctive assets that stay on brand and use the same elements over and over and over again to the point where you should be able to literally take away all the copy from the ad and literally just have that image. And
Yeah.
so, it comes back to the zero click content thing because with the carousel or with video content, you can use those same types of characteristics. And it could be something as simple as, the font you use. It could be a tagline. I mean, for example, like, you got Nike, just do it. You've got
Yeah.
the big golden, arches for McDonald's, which they've
Yeah.
actually done some really cool plays in the play. And this stuff is not just for B2C, it's for B2B too. Like Gong, let's use
Exactly.
a B2B example. Gong, for example, rebranded a while ago. And a lot of their distinctive assets were that like triangle, I don't even know what they call it, but it's like this triangle thing that came in from the sides. And they use that like just all over the place, as well as the caricatures or the abstractions they used of people were very much the same across all of their ad sets. I think they've now moved away from that for right or wrong reasons. Or Cognizant, another one. If you go to Cognizant's website, I don't know why they remind me of the Flintstones, or maybe it's the cereal or something like that, like Pebbles or something like that. I don't know what the cereal is called, but it's a little crazy. But if you go to Cognizant, for whatever reason, it reminds me of that when I look at it because he's got these all weird, just the coloration of it, and then like these kind of weird shapes. But literally, like if I saw an ad from Cognizant, they use those distinctive assets. I literally know exactly what company it is. And so, like, I
Yeah.
think that's the goal with that, and avoiding too much of this, like, let's just create a bunch of stuff that doesn't look at all like our brand. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No,
anyway.
that's the whole thing, like really it all comes down to a solid brand strategy and positioning and messaging, and a lot of startups they just are not ready to do this or not willing to do this, or they just, oh, okay, we're just going to come up with something and we're going to run with it.
Yeah.
But there's so like, it's like really brain programming, right? So it's like really, I saw the other day, what was it? This comedy series where Barney Stinson, How I Met
Uh-huh.
Your Mother. There was Barney
Yeah,
Stinson
yeah.
was
Oh, I love
trying to
that.
get,
Yeah.
he was trying to they were like in a restaurant, and there he wanted to get his friends to go to this Japanese restaurant, and
Mhm.
he just has been programming them like months before, like every time he sneezes, he
Mhm.
would say that we would go to that restaurant, right? And then whenever he wanted to manipulate them into going to that restaurant, he would sneeze, and
They'd
they would be like, "Oh,
sneeze.
let's go there," right? So it's
Exactly.
kind of like that. I mean, it's dirty. It sounds manipulative, but of course we should steer away from this kind of like dirty tactics. But basically, that's it. And I feel
Exactly.
like a lot of marketers, they don't understand that, and that's why we're wasting a lot of money, because we're trying to do the impossible, right? We're trying to get that
Mhm.
action. We're trying to get that. We think that we still think that we're the center of the universe and all the attention is going to us, but there is like people have zero attention, like almost zero.
Yeah.
And that's why you need to send those subliminal messages. That's why you need to repeat a lot. Um, and you need to stand out, and you need to be clear what this message is, like when your audience is ready to buy, and what is that situation that you want them to think of your brand, what do you want them to remember.
Right.
That's all you're optimizing for,
There's
right?
a great thing that's very related to this. I think it was John Lombardo that wrote a blog on Marketing Week about this a while ago, which of course is heavily influenced by the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. But they were talking about, I think he called it memory, or was it memory engine optimization or something like that.
Oh, I
But
didn't.
basically, I'll send you the blog article, or we can attach it to the notes of this. But the basic concept, and I think we were talking about this even before a little bit, but the idea is that non-brand bidding on non-brand keywords on Google a lot of times can be too late. And so to your point about memory structures and just like how to get in front of that whole process of being the second or third choice once they actually get to Google, is it just even use let me use like an easy example that's a little bit maybe graphic, but let's say that you have like, or I have a massive cockroach problem, right? I've got bugs all over my house, they're in my cereal, they're in my sofa, they're everywhere, right? And I've got a problem. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately think like, all right, who's someone that comes to mind that's a bug extermination company? Have I ever used anyone in the past before? And if I had a good
Yeah,
experience, I'm probably going to just call them up and just get them back over. If I don't have anyone and I've never had a bug problem, then ultimately I'm going to go and say, all right, well, what are some brands that come to mind? What are some brands that maybe I've seen or heard of, or just anything that I can recall? Because it's easier. I'm not going to ask a friend or go to my
exactly.
neighbor or go to a community, or I'm not going to go to Google until I've kind of exhausted. All right, I can't think of anyone. Nope. But in this case, let's say that, Terminix, for example, is top of mind. Terminix is one brand I do know. I've never had a bug issue, but they do come to mind because they've got the big X and this, they have this kind of like bright green all over their trucks. And I see their trucks, all around in the city that we're at. And so they come to mind as a brand. And so I'd likely look at that brand Terminix, go to Google, and I type in their brand name, Terminix, and then I'd maybe convert on a landing page. Now in B2B, nothing's that simple and transactional in most cases. And so you'd ultimately have to do due diligence, and you'd have to look at multiple different types of products, et cetera. But even still, if that happened, you'd still be the first one to come to mind that was familiar in the brand, in the mind of the buyer, which is playing into the mere exposure effect, which is just, the amount of repeated times you hear of a brand, the more likely it is to come
Yeah.
to mind, et cetera. And so the reason that non-brand and bidding just on non-brand keywords on Google is too late is because people are already accessing memories. And then even beyond that, let's say no one comes to mind to finish that whole story, then I might ask, a friend. I might ask you, hey, who's a good agency XYZ for this, or who's a good XYZ, person for that. And so anyway, I think like that's the train of thought that we typically go down. And if we don't come up with anything, it's Google or maybe now Chat GPT to get some recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like very often when I start with my clients, they're like, yeah, just run some Google ads. This is the most straightforward thing to do. Like there's the people who are looking for solutions, right? But the problem is that you're going to spend a lot of money to try to convince people who already have some preferences, to convince them that you are the better one. And you can do this but only if you really have a good reason, or you have something really revolutionary to tell there, and you're going to kind of redirect them
Exactly.
from your competitors in less moving, right?
Exactly. And I did one thing. I know you have probably another question, but just had one little short thing. It's not that non-brand bidding on like non-brand keywords is a bad thing. I mean, we run a lot of non-brand, high intent, bottom of funnel campaigns for a lot of our clients. It's just that you have to balance that type of motion that's more direct response when you're trying to capture demand that's existing with people that are expressing their intent to buy something or evaluate something. You have to balance that with other campaigns that are more geared towards aligning with those key buying triggers, or academic term would be category entry points, so that when they do think of you, they are saying, okay, cool, maybe instead of even writing in the non-brand term, I'm just going to type in your brand name, and you can see that in
Yeah.
search console. And so you can look at, all right, cool, like I'm seeing general traffic for my brand rise or decline or whatever it's doing. So ideally, you should start seeing rises in that. Of course, you could do more advanced incrementality tests and things like that to do it. But anyway, just to say that one last thing before you go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting stuff. So, about Google Ads, like while we're at it, I'm curious if you've seen any unconventional uses of Google Ads. Because when we think Google Ads, we usually think like, okay, these are people who are aware of a problem, or like they're already kind of aware of the category and the problems within that, and they type stuff. They know what they're looking for. And so brands have to show up there and capitalize on that. But I feel like the Google Ads could also be used as a brand play sometimes. And there are many creative uses of that. I'm curious if you've ever seen something like that, or have you maybe implemented anything like that?
There aren't too many examples. I mean, when you say Google ads, and if we're just talking just purely text ads, not YouTube and display, I haven't seen too many interesting examples. There's one that I vaguely remember. We don't use it a lot for brand building. It's to be very short, for us, but I'm sure there's some interesting use cases. But Grammarly at one point had some great text ads where they were just literally going after like the definitions and spelling of certain words, and so people would like commonly misspell XYZ word, and they had a very kind of clever, funny ad that helped them figure out how to spell that word better, or something like that. And so I think they were really accessing the frustration people had with trying to figure out how words were spelled. And I believe, I don't know this for direct, I haven't heard this directly from the Grammarly team, but I would imagine they looked at search volumes for some of the most misspelled words and ran ads against those, just knowing that there's a lot of volume for it, and it'd be a great way for people that struggle with misspelling things. And they use that as a way to kind of use a very kind of clever, funny brand voice within the text ads to then
That's a
direct
good
people
one.
to, hey, use Grammarly. We struggle spelling that word too. It's a pain in the ass, and you should be using Grammarly to just have it autocorrect immediately on the fly. So that might be an interesting one. There's not too many that come to mind outside of that, though. For me, outside of like YouTube and display, clearly. So
Yeah, awesome. That's I had to take a note. It's a great example. Thank you for sharing. Charlie says Cognizant did a very good competitor keyword strategy. Apparently, it worked very well for them. The ad copies are very good. You should see it if you Google Zoom info. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I love cases like this. Definitely
yeah,
taking a note here. Okay. So we still have 15 minutes to go, but I want to let you go at 5 minutes before, because you said that you have a meeting. So
yeah.
let's move on to the next question. So how do you usually work with clients who have you already mentioned that you work with clients who have their messaging figured out, or do you also kind of work with those who don't, and you kind of help them or guide them through this process, or how does that work?
Yeah. I guess I'd kind of jokingly say, have you met a marketer recently that has their messaging figured out? I feel like so often we're always like, we're figuring out our messaging, we're rebranding,
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how to reposition ourselves. And I feel like messaging is one of these elusive things that you never really, and even positioning too, to a degree, because positioning, I guess, is kind
Yeah.
of put, right before messaging. But
Yeah.
it's one of these elusive things that I think once you've got to, good
Yeah.
messaging or whatever you think it is, it immediately changes, and you've got all your competitors
Yeah.
following you using the same messaging, or how you position yourself, a year ago just isn't effective as it is today. But I know your point. I'm being a little bit crass. But yeah, I mean, messaging, usually we work with people that clearly have some messaging on their website or messaging and ad copy or cold emails that's already working to some degree. It just needs to
Mm,
get better and we need to get clear. So that would be, I guess, the easy, like quick TLDR answer to that. The one thing I would say that I think most people struggle with, and love the guys, Robert and Anthony over at Fletch. I'm sure you know them, but
yeah.
they've kind of highlighted something that I think we've all talked about for a while, and they've put the microscope into this one little thing, which I think is great because a lot of people are struggling just with being clear and specific about what they actually do. I think it's so often where we use like examples like HubSpot, which I think if you go to your website, their website right now, it's like grow better with HubSpot, or Salesforce might be, I don't know, something just really broad and vague. Even if you go to some of the product solution pages, and it's because those brands are already so big, we already generally
Yeah.
know the types of things that they do. And so I think that commonly with messaging, we get into these weird bouts where we want to be way too clever or way too broad, like the next revolutionary AI platform to advance your revenue or something like that. You're like, what the hell do you do? Just tell me what you do in like clear language. And I feel like a lot of messaging needs to be focused more on that. And so I think the back to your question, it's really kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, do we at least have some general theories on like what messaging is resonating today? Cool. If we do, let's go amplify that more with paid because we're already taking something that generally is starting to work and not wasting too much money on paid to amplify a message that maybe is not what we want to be associated with. And then we're just trying
Hmm.
to refine that message, make it clear. And I think it's where like product marketing as an org is for me probably the one of the most important departments and or person if it's a smaller org to have in a company because I think this is where most people struggle. I think it's really easy to create gated content, just top of funnel content, generally speaking. But to get really clear on the product so that people attach themselves to the core things it does and the problems it solves, man, like we just need to do a better job there. So
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just curious about that part. So you don't have to answer that. I'm not sure if that is really what you have experienced, but when you start working with a client and you obviously you're responsible for setting up the paid strategies, paid media strategies. Are you working really with like creative teams, or who comes up with the copy? Who comes up with context? How do you collaborate with these people? How does this work?
yeah, the way we do it is kind of two pronged. We have two tabs in our onboarding doc to get like it's really practical because theoretically, anyone could do this. Is we have messaging pillars that are
Mm-hmm.
broken out by the different segments we're targeting. Messaging pillars are just like what's the core thing that we're trying to communicate to this audience. It's effectively a creative brief and just kind of a much more shortened, abbreviated version. And so once we understand like what we're trying to communicate to an audience, then what we'll do if it's a product marketing type of campaign is we'll break out another tab which has the headers. I think it starts out with the feature, then it's the current way they do it, the future state of what it would look like to do it with our product, the actual capability of the job to be done, the problem that it's solving, and then the landing page and any other keywords that possibly are associated. And with those pieces of information, then we can kind of get together a really great piece of ad copy that really resonates because now we know generally the direction we're trying to go in terms of what we're trying to say. And again, has to come from direct. This has to be aligned with the marketing strategy. This is not a, hey, I'm a paid media manager. I'm going to go just test some stuff. No, 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 no. We can't do that type of thing. This has to be 100% aligned with the core marketing strategy so that
Yeah.
all channels, not just paid, but all channels are aligned with whatever the core messaging pillars are. And those, of course, can change and they'll adapt. It's not like they're set in stone, but we need to have some type of baseline. And ideally, structure them into a normalized way where you have one messaging pillar, another messaging pillar, another one, and label them accordingly so that we can actually understand which one's resonating. And I think sometimes, even internally at us, I always tell my team, sometimes we get a little lost in the weeds when we've got way too much messaging and it doesn't really roll up into a specific pillar. And it's like, come on, we got to really stay solid on some of those things. And so that's the way we think about it. But yeah, it's always a team effort. By no means, I think any agency out there is doing 100% on their own. You've got to get information from the client's brain in terms of customer knowledge, words they use, what we generally want to be saying, and then from a copywriting and editing perspective, then coming over top to refine that into something that ultimately people are going to get some value from, or click if we're talking about some type of ad that is trying to win the click. So
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, you know, I really like what you said about making sure that this is all rooted in the general marketing strategy, because at least from my experience at scrappy startups, early stage startups, they have a very channel centric approach, and they just do start like fragmented things on all the
yeah,
channels.
crazy.
And the thing is that, like, if you think about it, if you think about the marketing waiting room, if you think about the 95.5, it doesn't make sense, because you, like, the only thing that connects it all is your message, because you cannot
Mm.
follow people on all these channels, but
Yep.
you can broadcast the same message on all these channels and maximize your chance of that being heard, remembered, understood, and thought of when the time is right. And that's it. But we overcomplicate. We just come up with all kinds of technology. We're going to, you know, do omni-channel, or like we're going to track everybody everywhere, even when they go to the toilet. And
Yep.
that's just very inefficient, right? And that's
Yeah.
the thing that annoys me the most. And that is why I came up with the whole concept of the marketing waiting room, hoping that
Yeah.
people kind of flip the perspective a little bit from those fragmented channels here and there, or sorry, fragmented funnels here and there, to like a really consistent brand experience, because that's what it
Yeah.
is. Like, you get discovered, your brand gets discovered, and then something messy happens, you don't know what happens, and then they buy, right? Again, this
Yeah.
has to be very consistent. This has to be like a closed system. And it doesn't mean that you have to push people in there. They have to, they maybe subliminally somehow remember you. They might follow you on social media. They might like voluntarily sign up to your newsletter to get that deeper connection, deeper engagement, deeper experience with your brand. Because ultimately, also what
Right.
you're doing is your brand is like you're optimizing for the feeling that brand gives, right? And that feeling
Totally.
is manifested in all your channels, and also ultimately in your product, because you're promising that feeling, right? So that's
Mhm.
how I see it. And I think that paid media really play a big role here, and should be used in a very different way from how we use it. Most of us use it.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I mean, you definitely need to keep in mind the short term and the long term. And so I think, over indexing on everything being not direct response and
Yeah.
nothing bottom of the funnel, I think that would be the wrong decision too. That's an easy way
Oh
for,
yeah,
you as a marketing manager to get fired. So it's always a balance with these things. I mean, the ideal
exactly.
scenario is that you can at least hit some of the short-term goals or start showing some progress as a, VP of marketing or a, head of demand gen early on, by going after people that are warm, that have heard of you, getting people back that maybe you lost previously in terms of like a closed loss analysis, like those types of things, just to get a couple of short wins on the belt, because I think that's going to give
Yeah.
you a lot more. It's going to give you a lot more power when you get in the room with a CEO, assuming they're a non-marketer, to say, hey, like we really need more budget for this. We're already hitting some of these goals. Here's what I want to take some bigger bets on long term to generate future cash flows for the business. And here's generally the type of metrics that we're going to track to know if this is starting to work or not. I think that like that type of conversation is we're using, and I mean, this is something that we don't advise on this directly, but it's just something I know has worked in the past when we've had these conversations. And so I think if you took that approach, you'd have a much easier time to, have the budget to actually experiment with some of this stuff versus constantly be in the, like you've said countless times, in the short term type of mentality. Hey, how do we get a lead today? How do we get a lead tomorrow? So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Jonathan, I'll let you go just like I promised 5 minutes before, so you
Yeah,
can go to your
appreciate it.
meeting, take a break before. But thank you so much for sharing your insights. This has been really, really super cool to hear your side of the story and your experiences. And yeah, thank you so much for spending the time here with me today.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty.
Bye.